good news is, hell is just the product of a morbid human imagination. The bad news is, whatever humans can imagine, they can usually create.
These facts should be very pleasing. Try to enjoy each equally.
Well, it's official. If season 1 of Ben Stiller's show Severance was outstanding, then season 2 is a vessel-sharing masterpiece.
How many we shared vessels? They're fucking...
The amount of new details and the range of emotions I experienced through this episode is astonishing. And here is my review and every little detail you might have missed in Severance Season 2, Episode 7. So the episode starts as we see Gemma several years prior to the events of the show as she walks through the Ganz College that was mentioned in season 1 several times.
I got a tip from a campus cop at Ganz College.
This is exactly where Gabi was initially hiding, and this is where both Mark and Gemma used to teach.
I used to teach at this school.
This is obviously a fake college that doesn't exist in our world, and the name can have several meanings. There is something that is called the Ganzfeld effect. In psychology, when you're exposed to a uniform, unchanging environment, like staring at a blank field of color while hearing white noise, your brain, desperate for input, starts making things up. Hallucinations, distortions, just a false reality. Our innies live in an artificial, input-restricted world, cut off from normal experiences, very similar to a Ganzfeld experiment. Now, this kind of reminds me of the similar use of the whole Glasgow protocol with the Glasgow scale that basically measures people's awareness while they're in the coma, but we've built all this theory that Gemma is gonna be in coma because of Glasgow scale, and right now we know this is already not true. So I think all of those mentions like the Ganzfeld effect or the Glasgow scale, they can be just small winks to the people that understand those psychological concepts, and of course to the main idea of the show, which is obviously a human mind. Then there's also the German meaning of Ganz, and it literally translates to whole or complete, which is ironic because in Severance the whole point is that the innies and outies aren't whole at all. They're split, fractured, two halves of a single person, but neither one is truly complete. Also, the first time we see this college, as I told you, is when we meet Gabi, literally the person who is working to make innies and outies one whole personality, or one Ganz personality. So we discovered that Mark's and Gemma meet cute was during one of the annual blood donations in Ganz College, hosted by, you guessed it, of course, Lumon Industries, as indicated by the drop logo on the blood bank. Blood can in theory be used as identification since it contains our DNA, and we have seen that some doors in the hell floor are opened by a drop of blood by Nurse Ratched there.
So I'm editing this video right now, and actually one of my subscribers on Telegram dropped a very interesting idea. The Lumon logo, the drop, what if it's a blood drop? What if this whole meaning actually that we discussed many times is actually a drop of blood? I think it's very interesting.
By the way, in the scene of the meet cute, did you notice that Mark is wearing a different watch, not the one that Gemma gave him, with the Russian symbol of the Air Force unit? So just before she gave him the present, just a small detail that I thought you will enjoy. So the first scene directly tells us that Lumon was there from the very first day of their relationship, which right away drives me to ask all of the crazy questions that come to my mind. Did Lumon somehow know that Gemma is the best candidate for their experiments from the data they took from her blood? Or maybe did her blood somehow show Lumon that she is going to have a problem conceiving a child? You see, in our life, when someone is tested whether they can or cannot get pregnant, a blood test is one of the main tests. This is how we check the level of our hormones. Now, the third question that comes to my mind is, did Lumon maybe orchestrate everything that happens to this couple, including the miscarriage? An even crazier question, and I hope the answer is no, but still, was Gemma maybe sent there by Lumon to meet Mark at this moment? Anyway, moving on, this scene also starts one of the most beautiful portrayals of a relationship that I have ever seen on TV. And when they meet, both of them are in the middle of their job, just, like professor. Mark is grading the World War I papers, and Gemma is reading about the religion conversion theme in The Death of Ivan Ilyich by none the other but Leo Tolstoy, one of the most remarkable authors in Russian literature. This is not the first time his work is referenced in the show. We already have seen on Mark's fridge a print of a cover for a book Resurrection, and I've covered this in detail in this video, so you are more than welcome to check this out. And also Gemma mentions that she has a lection on Haji Murad, which is also a book by the same author. So there are many significant authors in Russian literature. Why Severance show creators would focus just on Tolstoy and his specific novels? The fact that Severance repeatedly references this author, specifically The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Resurrection and Haji Murad, isn't just a random artistic choice. These novels share profound themes of existential crisis, moral awakening, and the struggle between free will and societal control, all of which perfectly align with Severance's core ideas. The novel about Haji Murad talks about a struggle of a real Chechen warrior stuck between two worlds and rebelling against both of them, which resembles some themes of Severance, but the more interesting one is of course The Death of Ivan Ilyich. Now actually check this book online, it's very short, the audiobook is about 3 hours, I listened to it on a speed of x1.5, so it took me like 2 hours to go through all of the book. So you know when the doctor is saying,
Let me guess, he dies at the end.
He's actually only half right, because Ivan Ilyich dies both in the beginning and in the end. Igor, why are you talking about Leo Tolstoy and this book so much? It was just a small reference, you should move on to the more interesting topics. I promise you I have a point and I have a very interesting connection to a very interesting topic, so please bear with me for just a couple of seconds. So The Death of Ivan Ilyich tells the story of a successful judge who lives an ordinary, comfortable life, but when he becomes terminally ill, he realizes that his entire life has been hollow. His wife and his so-called friends didn't really care about him, and his whole existence is controlled by societal expectations rather than genuine meaning. Through conversation with his servant peasant boy Gerasim, who shows him the true meaning of life and spirituality, and just before death, Ivan suddenly has a profound realization. He was never truly alive. His life was empty because he only cared about status, not genuine human connection. Death is not the end, it is simply a transition, and there is no reason to fear it. Pain and suffering disappear as he finally accepts this truth. He suddenly stops resisting death and sees a bright light instead of darkness. His final words are, "What joy!" With one last sigh, Ivan dies peacefully without fear. His suffering vanishes and his fear of death is completely gone. Ivan was able in the final moments of his life completely release the hold to his ego and accept what life is.
I hear ego, hubris, arrogance. Kier teaches us they only cause pain.
This is actually very similar to the whole concept of Chikhai Bardo. Yeah, we are jumping from Russian literature straight to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Why not? You see, the end of The Death of Ivan Ilyich is not about death at all, it's about what happens right before it. The moment when pain disappears, when fear vanishes, and when Ivan, who spent his entire life running from the truth, suddenly understands that he was never truly alive. And in that final second, instead of darkness, he sees light. This moment, the transition between life and death, is exactly what Chikhai Bardo describes. If you are unfamiliar with the term, Chikhai Bardo comes from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it refers to the first stage of the afterlife, the phase where the soul encounters the clear light. It's supposed to be the moment of ultimate truth, where all illusions fade away. If you don't recognize it for what it is, if you still hold to your ego, your emotions, your karma, then you will be forced to reborn over and over again, living many lives.
I hear ego, hubris, arrogance. Kier teaches us they only cause pain.
And this is exactly what we are seeing in episode 7, with Gemma being trapped in a state between life and death. Not really dead, but not really alive, being forced to live different lives until she reaches this state of enlightenment that will allow her to become something or someone else.
Should you tame the tempers as I did mine, the world shall become but your appendage.
We can only assume that this enlightenment is gonna happen in the last room, the Cold Harbor room.
There's only one room I haven't been to yet, and today it had a name on it.
Cold Harbor.
In this scene with the cards, Gemma is explaining the very familiar to us card as Chikhai Bardo.
Chikhai Bardo.
It's the same guy fighting himself, ego death.
We all of course remember this card as 7199G that was stolen by Dylan and then recovered by Mr. Milkshake. This card was sent to Gemma by Dr. Mauer, probably, since he was the one to stalk Gemma, and in this paper that she is filling we can see in the text that she is asked to assign emotions that she feels to either the guy wearing a blue shirt or a green shirt. She compares this test to those drawings of rabbit or the duck, and we discussed this Milkshake office figurine in my previous video in detail. In case you missed it, once again you're more than welcome to go and check this out. Also, now the pose itself that the guy wearing a blue shirt is doing has nothing to do with the Book of the Dead and looks like something just from yoga, just like Gemma did in the Hell Floor. So once again, Chikhai Bardo, this is just how Gemma interprets something, and her interpretation, the way she sees the world, is probably what caused her to be chosen by Lumon for their experiment. Unfortunately for her, of course. Now, if you remember, when Bert received the card back from Mr. Milkshake, he says,
Oswald will be so delighted.
kinda makes us ask ourselves, who the hell is Oswald? This is probably one of the O&D workers, right? Well, maybe, but when Dylan is taking the card, he clearly takes it from Felicia's stand. This is her responsibility. So is it possible that maybe Dr. Mauer, his name is Oswald? He kinda looks like one, honestly, and if this is true, it means that Bert on the first name basis with one of Lumon's management, which will make more sense to the whole dinner party in the previous episode. Also, with all those intricacies, with all those hidden ideas and agendas and connections that are under the floor, is it possible that there was no real accident? Maybe Gemma knew she's not gonna come back home that night when she left Mark alone in his house, even though she offered him to come with her. I know it's a big stretch, but once again, what if? I mean, first time we see her, it doesn't feel like she's forced to be there, even though she tried to escape.
Didn't she try and break your fingers?
Also, she has no scars and no permanent damage after what's supposed to be a very devastating car accident. This episode had tons of shots that appeared for just half a second, and one of those moments were taken from season 1 when Mark was visiting the place where Gemma had her accident. I don't know it was from her perspective or from his. Anyway, we had a little bit addition there. We are seeing some kind of a POV from somebody who was watching the car leaving, and I don't remember this scene in season 1. Once again, just a small detail for you to consider, and we are coming back to Tibet, and obviously Chikhai Bardo is not the only reference.
Like Chomolungma.
When Devon is talking about Mount Everest, Gemma is correcting her, saying the name is Chomolungma. This is the Tibetan name for Mount Everest, and it translates to Goddess Mother of the World. That and her immediate reaction to interpret the cards as Chikhai Bardo tells us that in addition to Russian literature, she was really into Tibetan religion and concepts which probably shaped her whole life philosophy. Also in this scene we can notice that camera focus on blue eryngiums flowers. And flowers is the topic that I'm completely clueless about, but luckily there are tools like find similar images, and I was able to find one on one of the stock platforms website, so it kinda made me understand what is the flower that we're looking at. And this flower head is surrounded by spiky Steve bracts that almost resemble thorns. And in this moment, this is the first time we are seeing Mark and Gemma fight, and for no apparent reason. Flowers are pretty important for Gemma. She's decorating her bed with drawings of flowers in the Hell Floor, and she obviously loved her beautiful garden with deers and ladybugs and very soft, beautiful flowers that appear in a lot of shots. They obviously symbolize the first year of their love that was just like those flowers, very soft, beautiful, and almost perfect.
And when she sneezed, she always sneezed twice.
Go!
Also in Gemma's study room there's a lot of material that can be analyzed, but I want to focus on that image. This is the autograph manuscript of a page of a book, The Demons, by F.Dostoyevsky. So the title The Demons refers to the possessed, characters who are controlled by an ideology, like demons inhabiting their minds. I don't know about you, but it right away made me think about Milkshake, Natalie, Drummond, Selvin, Kwang, and the rest of Lumon shills willing to become demons and torturers for, well,
Kier.
Anyway, going back to Gemma's and Mark relationships, the peak of their happiness was Gemma getting pregnant, and from that moment on, it all went down the hill, since Gemma had a miscarriage which led them to a fertility clinic operated of course by no other than Lumon Industries, as indicated with the drop logo here in the questionnaire. Did you notice, by the way, that they are asking for your address? Also, you probably caught Dr. Mauer throwing a look at Gemma and Mark when they entered the clinic. What the hell is dentist even doing in a fertility clinic, right? Well, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure this guy is definitely not a doctor. Well, he is a great actor since he can take any role. So I think he was there deliberately, waiting for Gemma, since Lumon probably had their eyes on her since the day they took her blood. Putting aside that this episode as a standalone by itself was very, very emotional, made me angry, made me sad, made me happy, romantic, everything, all of the list of emotions was present in this episode. It was also very close to home. Me and my spouse, it took us more than a year to get pregnant. We both had some issues that needed treatment, and all of those scenes with the hormone shots, the resentment, the feeling of guilt, like you're the one that holding your spouse back, even though like both of us were having some issues there. It all feels really, really close to home. But there is difference, because it looks like in Mark's and Gemma's couple, the one who can get pregnant is Gemma. This is why she's apologizing to Mark. And even though he is trying to wave it off, the resentment is there. You can feel it when he's doing the hormones shot, and this leads to Gemma shutting off inside herself with this beautiful scene when she's closing the door before Mark. And of course, this all leads to the scene with which I started, when the anger is boiling inside and just looking for an excuse to burst the surface.
Tell me how I'm feeling.
I have no idea how you're feeling.
This is a very fucked up snowball with a lot of resentment, anger. It doesn't really matter how much you love each other, it's obviously help, but still, anger, resentment, depression are gonna be there. Every time when there's a couple that wants to get pregnant and can't, it will take its toll. And by the way, I absolutely love this scene when Mark is breaking the bassinet on the second floor while Gemma is on the first one in the dark. The symbolism of where they are right now in this story is perfect. So if you can remember the book The UUR, you know that eventually Riken was able to convince Mark and Gemma to join them on a hike, and exactly half a year later, Gemma is telling Mark about Denali.
Did you get the Denali thing I said?
So she's of course talking about the highest mountain in North America, standing 6,000 meters tall. It's located in Alaska and it's one of the 7 summits. The name Denali means the high one in Koyukon Athabaskan, a language spoken by indigenous Alaskan people. This is the day Gemma supposedly dies. And this is the day we finally understand the opening scene in the intro for the first season. Look at the shadow, look at the shaving on Mark's face. This is what started it all, and this makes sense that the intro starts with Mark's divided to 2 different personalities. One's in the shadow and the other one is in the light. So this brings us to the main and the most interesting part of this episode, Gemma on the hell floor. So what do we know so far? Gemma was probably chosen because of her inability to give birth. It kinda makes sense, the episode suggested, so as the intro that is full with severed babies and a creepy Kier eagan baby in the end. Hopefully Gemma is not gonna get pregnant with Kier, but everything can happen. I don't know 100% what it is, but it has to have some connection to babies. So let's spend this day with Gemma and see what we can learn from her experience in the hell floor. The first thing will be the checkups, which starts as usual. She gives blood, they checked her blood pressure, the temperature, but then there is this device which is called Wu meter. As you remember, Wu is one of the 4 tempers that Grandpa Lenin Kier told us to tame in order to make our world nothing but our appendage.
Woe, frolic, dread, malice, tame the tempers as I did mine, and the world shall become but your appendage.
Well, I have no idea how one can measure Wu with frequencies and why there is left and right W0, but I assume that Gemma is holding those stones to create some kind of a calisthenic balance, so the measuring of the right and the left brain lobes will be more accurate. On this device we have the calibration button, the frequency increase-decrease roller, and something that measures the time of the test. Probably. Anyway, Lumon is weird. Just look at this chart for eye exam with the goats. Can you imagine this test, how it goes?
Goat, 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 okay, goat, 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 I cannot understand the last one, sorry.
So every day, Gemma's supposed to visit a random number of rooms that are named just like the files that our MDR heroes were refining for the past 2 seasons, like ALLENTOWN, Cairns and Drainsville that were refined by Mark S, Sienna that was refined by Haley R, and Tumwater that was refined by Dylan G. There are a couple of new names like Loveland, which is a city in Colorado, Rhodes, which is an island in a city in Greece, and Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand and also one of the most awesome cities I have ever been to in my life, and some more, and all of them are locations and places on a world map. In my video about MDR files, I analyzed them and we have seen a lot of connection to the different battles in our history, and I also noticed that one of the books on mark tables is Somme, which is one of the largest battles of World War I. I'm gonna try to zoom in on this one. As I told you many times, I'm a big fan of Tolkien, and Tolkien was a part of Somme battle. It was one of the bloodiest battles of World War I. Hundreds of thousands people died, like almost million, I think, maybe even more, and this was his unit, Lancashire Fusiliers. So many people died that you can buy those just in a store. So it's completely authentic, it's real, obviously 100%, and it cost me like I think 30 euros or 40 euros or something like this. So just gonna give you a perception of how many people died in this freaking battle. Anyway, let's get back to the rooms. For each room, Gemma is forced to wear a different outfit, and we get a glimpse into 3 locations and 4 outfits. From Gemma reaction, we can see that she has been through those doors many times. And even though she doesn't remember what happens in those doors, she remembers what feeling she experienced after them. So the first room is Wellington, where Dr. Mauer pretends to be a dentist just to torture Gemma's other personality. Can you imagine this existence, this life, from the moment you become aware of yourself until the moment you hopefully die? All happens in the dentist chair, all the time, non-stop. You finish and 2 seconds later you're once again need to start all over again. I mean, this is beyond torture. This is something unimaginable. The thought of it makes me, like when I'm thinking about this moment and when I look at Gemma, the way she holds her hands, the way she tries to be protected, the way she begs for this break, just a couple of minutes, I mean, the protective side of me is going insane. The only thing that comes to my mind is Irving's words.
Let's burn this place to the ground.
So I can only assume, of course, but this room feels like a representation of one of the Tempers, specifically Wu. Yes, she is terrified, but just for a brief moment. That is followed by 2 hours of dental torture. If that's not Wu, I don't know what is. The second room is the plane crash scenario, which is definitely dread. I've been on a plane hundreds of times. When I was younger, I traveled a lot, and until this day, anytime there's a hit of turbulence, everything inside me shrinks. The thought of your existence is just always being on a plane crash is to me scarier than almost anything. Also, did you notice that unlike the first room, this one has pretty amazing graphics? We can see clouds, or is it mountains, and the plane is shaking very realistically, which suggests that Lumon has some AR or VR capabilities, which can conclude that maybe episode 4 was not taking place in real-life location, or as my friend Real from the channel Real Enigmas and Theories noticed, this is the team building room. Also, I have a question. Is this Dr. Mauer made of steel? How else he is not yet hospitalized after being thrown like that, what I assume happens every couple of days. Now, the last detail in this scene is the exact same suitcases, which I assume were made by O&D printers, very similar to all the different tools and toys in the Christmas room, which is definitely MALICE. Gemma was visibly angry there. She was forced to do something that she hates.
I'll write you a thank you note.
Hate writing thank you notes.
How much longer do I have to do this?
And to add pain to injury, she was forced to do this with her left arm. And Dr. Mauer's remark about this being the last one seems particularly cruel, since this is definitely not the last one for Gemma, because in about a second, In her existence, she will have to do this again. So now we know that MDR is working for Gemma, they're refining the numbers for her, and O&D is probably also focused on Gemma. They are making all of those toys, all of those tools, dental, for the Christmas room, whatever. So maybe the other departments are also there for Gemma. Maybe there's one room that she's supposed to interact somehow with the goats, maybe she needs to kill them, make a sacrifice every time. I don't know, just a thought there. But if you remember, in the Severance floor we also have at least 3 another departments, as we have seen in the control room, the WN, the CL and the TA. I have no idea what those means, so if you have something in your mind, please share your ideas in the comments.
Hatchets weren't aggressive.
And yeah, what about the hatchets? Maybe she was using the hatchets to kill the goats, or she's supposed to fight for her life in one of the rooms. By the way, did you notice that the Christmas tree toys in ALLENTOWN room, those bells, look almost identical to the Christmas tree Gemma and Mark had in this scene? It makes me think that they are not just making rooms to force Gemma to experience certain emotions or tempers, but they are actually somehow personal to her, just to test the severance barriers even more, if she will remember more.
Are the severance barriers holding?
So there's also this sportsy outfit, but we didn't see the inside of the room. Since all of her clothes and the rooms are somehow connected to the 60s, 70s, 80s era, I can only assume that the training was also in a very playful manner, which was very popular in that period of time. So it leaves us FROLIC as the last temper you should tame in order to bring the remedium hominibus, cure for humanity. But let's get back to the whole severance barriers are holding moment. We have seen Dr. Mauer, and by the way, Mauer is German for wall, like you get it, he's the wall between her and Mark, between her and freedom, between her and, you know, like whatever you want. You can extend this metaphor as much as you like. So Dr. Mauer is asking Gemma questions that are supposed to check whether those barriers actually holding.
You remember nothing? How did you feel in the hall? Did you exit any of the rooms feeling despair, fervor, gaiety?
So we can assume that at least one of the goals of this Gemma's experiment is to expand Severance to many more different personalities and to see if they are completely severed, right? But there is a very big but here. Going to the dentist is unpleasant, but I remember when they removed my wisdom tooth, it was unpleasant, yeah, but the worst part was 2 days after, when I was taking crazy-ass painkillers just to shut the pain down. And we see that also in this episode, when Gemma is leaving Wellington, her mouth hurts.
My mouth hurts.
When she leaves ALLENTOWN, her hand hurts after writing all those thank you notes. You can separate emotions, but you can't separate physical pain, unless you are willing sometime lose days or even months of your life. Is this maybe what Cold Harbor is for? Is this the last stage which will allow Gemma to reach illumination, pun intended, and transcend to some kind of new being that is not going to experience pain ever again?
Kier will take away all his pain, just as Kier has taken away yours.
Look, honestly, you can break this episode into like 5-6 different videos and you can deep dive into all of them. And while I'm even typing those words, this voice inside of my brain keeps telling me that I need to wrap up, since it's Saturday already and I didn't even start recording. But then again, I can't skip the Watchers. Right under the MDR office, there is a copy one. Literally, where we have 4 people similarly looking to our heroes. There's their Mark, their red-headed Heli R, Dylan and Irving. They have a very weird TV set with 4 screens, 1 big one and 3 small ones, and a joystick with 4 buttons and what can I assume is an on-off switcher. On the screen we can see the numbers that our heroes refine, we see the view of the camera from inside their computer screen, and we see this screen, which directly corresponds with 5 folders we see on MDR screens. We still don't know why we have 5 folders and 5 bars. It can be connected somehow to the 5 brainwaves that Rigabi mentions in episode 3.
The monitors differentiate the 5 brainwave frequencies of the innie and outie.
But even if there is a connection between the 5 brainwaves and those folders, believe me, it's not very scientific. I spent a couple of weeks already trying to study this subject. I talked to people that do neuroscience for their living, professors, etc. It's not very scientific. Believe me, I don't want to bore you too much with the scientific talk, especially since I'm not an expert, but you know that our brain, the neurons are moving, they're producing electricity. If you put EEG on our brain, you will be able to see different frequencies, the way, the movement of neurons, the speed of the movements. The slower movements, the slower frequencies are connected to our state of relaxation, of resting, daydreaming, and so on. The faster ones are usually become more dominant when we are doing some focused work, when we are learning something, when we're ready to do, like tear the world apart and all of this motivational bullshit. So obviously our brain creates frequencies all the time, all of the 5 frequencies, but their amplitude is different, and this is how you determine which one of them is more dominant. So when, for example, you're studying, obviously all of the frequencies are there, but the faster one will be more dominant with the higher amplitude. So technically, and it's very loose technically, and it's a very in your imagination, not even science fiction kind of imagination, more of a fantasy one. Theoretically, you can separate one person into 2 different personalities if, let's say, they have a chip inside of their brain that in one moment switches drastically one dominant brainwave to a different one. Obviously, it's not enough. You're gonna have to block a memory retrieval and, work with amygdala and prefrontal cortex, but it's, as I told you, this is way too much for this video. But if you remember, in the Lexington letter, in the instruction, it is said that the refiners have to divide the clusters evenly. But in this shot of the Drainsville file, the one that was done by Mark in season 1, we can see that the tempers are definitely not even. In the first bar, we can already see that Wu is above 25% Mark, which is more than a quarter. So maybe just like with the brainwave, they somehow choose which one of those 5 bars will be the more dominant. Yeah, I know, but maybe you have a different idea. There is another question that bugs me and I have no answer for. We clearly have seen Mark was working on Drainsville file, and of course he is the one to refine called Harbor. But on the screen, when they see that the chip that works on the file, the Cold Harbor file, is 109827. We have seen that this is Mark's chip in the control room, and then we have seen that this is the number on Heli R's chip, which is already weird. But then again, when we move to the Drainsville file, we can see that the number that is working on the file is 400263280, which is a different identification number for presumably the same person. What is going on with the chimp numbers? This is me just barely scratching the surface. There are a lot of those kind of inconsistencies there, so I don't know if it's just, the creators didn't really put too much attention to it, or is it supposed to mean something? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, did you notice something very, very interesting in the Health Lord, Dr. Mauer and the Watchers? When the evil doctor is asking Gemma questions about her emotions, we can see that one of the Watchers is mapping her brain. We are seeing the same hexadecimal numbers just like on the MDR screen. What is hexadecimal? Okay, let me try to explain. And a good thing that I'm a moron and I'm trying to explain those complicated issues in a very simple manner, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to grasp them. So it helps me to make those videos hopefully more understandable for everybody else who is, I suppose, way smarter than me. So hexadecimal numbers are a base 16 numbering system that includes digits from 0 to 9 and letters A to F, where A is 10, B 11, and so on until F is 15. Unlike the decimal system, which is based on 10, that we use in everyday life, hex is used in computing because it provides a more human-readable representation of binary data. Each hex digit corresponds to 4 bits of binary, making it particularly useful for representing memory addresses, color codes, cryptographic keys, and system-level data in programming. For example, the hex number 0x1838 translates to 001, 010, 0011, 1111. I'm pretty sure all of us are going to remember that, right? So this allows developers to work with machine-level information more efficiently. Now, hexadecimal notation isn't just about sorting or organizing data, it's also about mapping and processing information at a fundamental level. In neuroscience, for example, a similar principle applies when studying neural coding. The way the brain encodes, processes and transmits information using electrical signals we just spoke about. Neurons don't communicate in words or images, they fire in patterns of electrical impulses, much like how a computer stores and manipulates information in a binary or hex. Each brain signal carries meaning based on frequency, intensity, and sequence, creating a vast and complex system of encoding sensory experiences, memories, and emotions. And by the way, when neurons form into a group and they start to be responsible for some memories, thoughts, and even emotions, they are called clusters. We are seeing that the watcher is locating and mapping Gemma's brain while she's talking to the doctor in live format. And if you remember Dylan's words about the data that it's coming from upstairs,
No, all the data comes from upstairs, fully encoded.
well, it's actually from downstairs, and the data is Gemma's brain that is being refined to new personalities. What does it mean to be a refiner? A refiner is someone who makes something pure, more usable and more accessible, whether it is the oil industry, the sugar industry, or our industry. As a Lumon refiner, you'll be removing impurities from data and reorganizing that data into its purest form. So maybe we can assume that they're trying to create a perfect personality by removing parts of Gemma's memories every time until they're gonna reach this enlightenment, pain-free, guilt-free, woo-free, dread-free, malice-free, and frolic-free personality. And I think Cold Harbor is that last part that's supposed to make Gemma this perfect human being, just like Kier imagined. Praise Kier. And the last thing I have to mention in this review is the cinematography. The director for this episode is Jessica Lee Gain, and she was also the cinematographer for all of the episodes until this moment. And I think this is the best decision that was made until this moment for this show. Right now, Chikhai Bardo is rated 9.5 on IMDb, which makes it the highest rated episode in this TV show and one of the highest rated episodes in the history of television.
Being able to do these flashbacks, these memories, to me, I just want it to be as simple as possible, to just like let the story tells itself. You just didn't want the technicality to get in the way of that part of the filmmaking. So we really stripped it down. Honestly, if you look at it, it's shot, counter shot. I wanted it to be really simple because of all the technical stuff we were doing. But then we wanted to do a set that was very confusing in its own way, and we had a very new kind of language. And we went with these diagonals and triangles, which is interesting, you know, the triangle of Helly, Gemma, and Mark. But one thing that was a total synchronicity that we found out later with this set, and I think Jeremy and I, our minds were blown with this. And Severance is a show that has been blessed with many, many synchronicities. But when we went back to that college, Ganz College, which is Nassau Community College in New York, and when we went back there, we had to find an office. And then when we went to look at the offices that were available there in this like big tower, we take the elevator and the doors open to this floor. And this was after we knew we wanted to do a triangular set. But as soon as the doors open, Jeremy and I walk in and we have this moment where we look at each other and we're speechless again.
And I beg you, please go and listen to the podcast with Ben and Adam. They were interviewing Jessica in this episode, and there's a lot of insight into her brain and the way she decides to film. And there was a lot of choices, amazing choices by her in this episode. It's not a coincidence that it's rated 9.5 on IMDb, probably one of the highest rated in the history of television. All of those amazingly done transitions, all of those beautifully placed shots, the choice to make the flashbacks in film and not in digital, everything screams genius to me, and I really hope she's gonna get more opportunities to become a director for this TV show, because this episode blew my mind. And right now, with all of those, unsuccessful takes, I'm already talking to you for about an hour, and I barely scratched the surface. If I'm just gonna put every thought that is running through my mind while I'm analyzing this episode, I'm gonna be able to release the video when the TV show is gonna be over. And hopefully I will release more material about the whole Hell Floor, and maybe something more about Devon and Regabi, what's gonna happen with Cobell. There's a lot of different theories, a lot of ideas. After this episode, my mind is exploding. It took me 2 days just to try to organize some thoughts into what I hope is a cohesive and understandable video. And if you liked it, you know who to thank. Those amazing people that you see on the screen right now, they support me through thick and thin. They are my sponsor. They are the ones who motivate me. Without their support, I would probably be way more in the rush to release the video in the same day just to get on the hype train. But with them, I know there is somebody who is looking for quality, and I will do my very best to never disappoint them. So if you enjoyed the video, you know exactly who to thank. And I also want to welcome new members. We have a beacon of light, Nicknack235. Thank you so much for joining our community. We have Janine, who became a champion, and I want to welcome Janine to our small community. And we have Dancing Penguins, which is a very awesome name, as a motivator. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. Thank you for everybody else for watching this video until this moment. If you like what you have seen, you can like, subscribe, write an interesting comment. If you want to support me financially, you know exactly how and when to do it. And of course, as usual, I hope I'm gonna be able to see all of you in the next video. And meanwhile, bye!